welcome to everybody on this Sunday morning. Glad to see you all here. This event's Marxism 22, organised by the Socialist Workers' Party, and this meeting is Stopping Le Pen, Fighting Fascism in France. I'm Maxine Bowler, I'm an SVP member from Sheffield, and I'll be chairing the meeting. Today I'm really pleased that we've got Vanina Guidicelli, who's an anti-racist and anti-fascist campaigner from Paris and is involved in d'autonomie de classe. So she's going to speak, and there's going to be a translator as well, and afterwards we'll have plenty of time for discussion and contributions.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, I will speak in French because I don't speak English fluently, and Jad will translate me. Peut-être pour commencer, rappeler que moi, quand j'ai commencé à militer, c'était à la fin des années 90, il semblait y avoir un paradoxe, c'était le début du mouvement anti-capitaliste avec les grandes manifestations à Seattle, en même temps qu'en Autriche, il y avait un parti d'extrême droite qui arrivait dans un gouvernement de coalition.
So when I first started becoming militant politically, it was towards the end of the 1990s, and there seemed to be a paradox happening. On the one hand, it was the beginning of the large anti-capitalist movements, for instance, the demonstration in Seattle. And on the other hand, there was a fascist party got into a coalition government in Austria.
En 2002, le même paradoxe se reproduit en France, c'est les élections présidentielles, et la gauche révolutionnaire, Lutte ouvrière et la LCR font plus de 10% des voix, en même temps que Jean-Marie Le Pen, le dirigeant du Front National, accède au second tour de l'élection.
So in 2002, something similar seemed to be happening in France, where in the presidential elections, the revolutionary left, there were two candidates of the revolutionary left, LCR and Lutte ouvrière, got in between them more than 10% of the vote, and at the same time, the fascist candidate Jean-Marie Le Pen got through to the second round for the first time.
Il y a eu une analyse très utile pour arriver à comprendre ce qui apparaissait comme un paradoxe, c'est celle formulée par Tony Cliff, le fondateur du SWP, qui comparait la situation à l'époque aux années 30 au ralenti.
So, and there was a very useful analysis put forward at the time to try to explain what was going on. It was put forward by Tony Cliff, so the founder of the SWP, where he said that the period looked like the 1930s, but in slow motion.
Cette analyse, elle était très utile pour comprendre que sur le fond de crise générale du système, pouvait se développer une polarisation de classe, d'un côté des attaques de plus en plus dures contre nos vies et nos conditions de travail, et le développement de l'extrême droite, et de l'autre côté, des résistances à une échelle importante.
So what this analysis allowed us to see is that in a period of crisis, of prolonged crisis of capitalism, you could have a very sharp class polarization going on, where on the one hand you'd have more and more attacks from the state on our standards of living and things like that, and on the other hand a lot of resistance.
Alors, il mettait en avant ce phénomène au ralenti en expliquant que la crise était moins dure que celle de 1929, que de l'autre côté, l'extrême droite n'avait pas encore des milices de masse organisées avec des armes et que les résistances étaient également moins exacerbées. On n'en était pas encore à des phénomènes d'occupation des îles et de reprise de contrôle de la situation.
So the slow motion bit was because first of all, the economic crisis itself was not as deep and as dramatic as the 1929 crisis. Second, the fascist parties and the fascist organization did not have mass street fighting militias as they had in the 1930s. And third, the resistances themselves were a bit less sharp. You had less, mass occupation of factories and workplaces and things like that.
Et Tony Cliff concluait à l'époque en disant qu'on rentrait dans une période d'extrême possibilité, c'est-à-dire de danger fasciste d'un côté, mais aussi de possibilités de regroupement, de perspectives révolutionnaires.
So Cliff concluded that we were entering a period of extreme possibilities. On the one hand, the possibility of fascism, and on the other hand, the possibility of mass resistances, very radical mass resistances emerging.
Alors, où est-ce qu'on en est 20 ans plus tard, en 2022 on est à un niveau de situation de polarisation en France jamais vu depuis les années 30.
And 20 years later, in 2022, in France at least, we are in a position of polarization that is so sharp that we haven't seen actually since the 1930s.
Il y a des articles de Judith Orr dans la revue AIS que je vous conseille, qui mettent en avant justement cette extrême polarisation. Par exemple, on est à la suite des élections présidentielles à 420 000 voix seulement d'écart entre le principal parti fasciste, aujourd'hui appelé le Rassemblement national, avec Marine Le Pen, et de l'autre côté, la gauche radicale, anti-capitaliste, avec Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
C'est un article de Judith. This polarization was very well put forward by Judith in an article in the recent ISJ, where, for instance, you have only 420,000 votes of difference between the principal fascist party in France, the Rassemblement National, and NUPES, c'est ça? And the left, and Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Dans cette situation, discuter des stratégies pour gagner contre le fascisme devient de plus en plus fondamental.
So in this situation, to be able to discuss different strategies to fight the fascists becomes extremely important.
Alors sur le danger fasciste en France, pour donner quelques éléments, la première chose, c'est évidemment le Rassemblement national.
So to talk about the fascist danger in France, first of all, we have to talk about Rassemblement national.
C'est en soi un gros débat, la caractérisation du Front National. Est-ce qu'il s'agit d'un parti de la bourgeoisie ou d'un parti, malgré tout, qui a ses spécificités? Et ce qu'on essaye d'argumenter, nous, c'est que justement, de sa création en 1972 jusqu'à aujourd'hui, le Rassemblement national continue à porter un projet fasciste.
So one issue is how do we characterize the Rassemblement national? Is it a classical party of the bourgeoisie, of the capitalist class, or is it, as we argue, has it carried since its foundation in 1972 a fascist project, which is still very much going on?
Malgré toute la stratégie de diabolisation entamée par Marine Le Pen, ce qu'on peut constater, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, les députés du Rassemblement national sont tous sauf des députés de la droite classique.
So, in spite of the detoxification strategy that was adopted by Marine Le Pen, we can see very clearly that the 89 MPs who were elected to Parliament, the 89 Rassemblement National MPs, are very far from being normal right-wing MPs.
Le premier discours d'un des députés du Rassemblement national, c'était pour regretter le temps de l'Algérie française.
The first speech of a Rassemblement National MP in Parliament was all about regretting the time of reminiscing the time of French Algeria.
Plusieurs députés comparent l'avortement, le droit à l'avortement à un génocide de masse.
Many Rassemblement National MPs have compared the right to abortion to a mass genocide.
Et il y a même un député du Rassemblement national qui a été condamné à 6 mois de prison ferme pour avoir tiré sur un groupe de jeunes en les traitant de sales nègres au moment d'un collage. Et il est propriétaire par ailleurs d'une librairie qui vend des livres négationnistes.
Okay, so and one of the MPs had been sentenced to 6 months in prison for having fired with a weapon at a group of people putting up posters while yelling racial slurs, and he owns a bookshop that publishes Holocaust-denying publications.
Mais en plus de la campagne du Rassemblement national, la nouveauté en France a été une nouvelle candidature, celle d'une personnalité politique et médiatique qui s'appelle Éric Zemmour, qui a mené une campagne encore plus radicale que celle que pouvait mener Marine Le Pen.
And one new thing in these latest elections in France was another fascist candidate. He was originally a TV personality. His name is Éric Zemmour, and he actually campaigned on an even more radical discourse than the Rassemblement National.
Rappelez que Pétain avait honoré la France en sauvant les Juifs.
So he tried to remind everyone that Marshal Pétain had honored France and had protected Jews.
Expliquer que les migrants mineurs étaient tous des voleurs et des violeurs.
And he was saying that underage migrants were all rapists and thieves.
Et sur ce profil-là, il a réussi à rassembler tous les groupes violents en France d'extrême droite et réussi à faire des meetings comme à Paris avec 50 000 personnes.
And on this basis, he was able to gather more or less all the small street fighting fascist groups in France, and he was able to hold a meeting in Paris or right outside Paris with almost 50,000 people in attendance.
Tout ça a créé un climat en France de plusieurs mois de campagne où ce qui dominait dans les médias, dans les débats, c'était les positions de l'extrême droite.
And all of this has put up an atmosphere in France where during we had several months of electoral campaign where what the discourse that dominated in debates, in the medias and things like that was the positions of the far right.
Et ça a évidemment eu des répercussions dans nos militantismes au quotidien. Plusieurs initiatives de syndicalistes, des meetings antifascistes ont été attaqués.
And this, of course, had repercussions on our activity. Many anti-fascist meetings, many gatherings called by trade unionists were attacked.
Et à Paris, il y a même eu 2 meurtres par des fascistes, 2 meurtres racistes.
And in Paris, we've had 2 different racist murders by fascist activists, by far-right activists.
Alors pour parler maintenant des résultats du Rassemblement national, Marine Le Pen a réussi à faire 13 millions de voix au second tour de l'élection présidentielle.
So about the results of the presidential campaign, Marine Le Pen was able to get 13 million votes in the second round.
Et 89 députés du Rassemblement national sont rentrés au Parlement.
And 89 MPs of the Rassemblement National are in parliament today.
Alors nous n'avons pas encore des groupes armés, des milices et un mouvement de masse fasciste.
We still don't have armed fascist militias and a mass movement, a mass street movement for fascism.
Mais d'abord, c'est ce qu'ils essayent de construire, et ensuite, leur victoire électorale va ouvrir d'énormes possibilités financières, politiques, organisationnelles.
But this is what they have been trying to build, and their electoral success is going to open up a lot of opportunities for them in terms of influence in institutions, financing, and stuff like that.
Alors, comment faire face à ce danger fasciste?
So what to do with this fascist danger?
Marine Le Pen a en partie donné des éléments de réponse quand elle a été interviewée au mois de janvier par un média de droite.
Marine Le Pen actually gave us some answers when she was interviewed by a right-wing media a few months ago.
Où elle critiquait la stratégie de Zemmour en expliquant que le problème de la violence de l'extrême droite, c'est qu'elle créait un plafond de verre dans la mesure où ça provoquait des surmobilisations de la gauche pour l'empêcher.
And she was criticizing, it was back in December, she was criticizing her rival in the presidential election, Éric Zemmour, for being too radical, and that and she said that far-right violence actually creates a glass ceiling for the far right because it leads the left to over-mobilize, in her words.
On retrouve ce qu'ont été les débats au sein des formations fascistes déjà dans les années 20 et 30, où il y avait ce que Gramsci caractérisait comme le fascisme en tension, la nécessité de construire des groupes, un mouvement de masse avec des groupes armés, en même temps que pour gagner toujours plus de personnes, il faut avoir de la respectabilité dans les institutions.
And this makes us recall the same debates that were going on in the 1920s and 1930s inside fascist organizations, when Antonio Gramsci talked about fascism in tension, always in tension between, on the one hand, the need to actually gather more and more support on a very radical basis, on a very violent basis, and on the other hand, the need to get institutional respectability.
Et c'est ce qu'a réussi à faire Marine Le Pen en plusieurs années. Quand on compare avec la situation en 2002, où son père se retrouve au deuxième tour de l'élection présidentielle, à l'époque, 1 million de manifestants dans les rues pour protester. Jacques Chirac, qui était qui passait au second tour de l'élection présidentielle, avait refusé de débattre avec elle, et des médias, des grands médias en France, refusaient d'interviewer Jean-Marie Le Pen.
So if we and Marine Le Pen was actually had quite a lot of success in the respectability issue, because if you compare her arrival to the second round in 2022 and the arrival of her father to the second round in 2002, back then there were over 1 million demonstrations, anti-fascist demonstrations between the two rounds, with over 1 million people. Jacques Chirac, the candidate at the time, refused to hold a public debate with Jean-Marie Le Pen, and many mainstream newspapers refused even to interview him during the campaign.
Aujourd'hui, pour comparer, il y a un député de la France Insoumise qui a refusé au Parlement de serrer la main des députés du Rassemblement National, et aujourd'hui il est attaqué de tous les côtés pour refuser de jouer le jeu des institutions.
So, and to compare, today there is an MP from the France Insoumise, so Mélenchon's group, who refused to shake hands with the fascist MPs in Parliament, and now he is being attacked on all sides for not playing the institutional game, not playing by the rules of the institution.
Nous devons recréer les conditions où ce député se retrouve plutôt à être dans la logique de la population, le sentiment de rejet du Rassemblement national.
Our task is to recreate the conditions where this act by this MP is actually more normalized and is actually reflects the sentiment of the majority of the population.
Le deuxième élément, c'est qu'évidemment, la raison pour laquelle les gens ont massivement voté le Rassemblement national, c'est pour des raisons liées au racisme. La volonté de fermer les frontières aux migrants, la volonté de rejeter les musulmans ou les supposés musulmans.
One other very important element is that the reason why so many people voted for Rassemblement National, their prime motivation is actually racism. It's about closing the borders, keeping migrants out, and it's about attacking Muslims or people they identify as Muslims.
Donc on a lancé en France avec 400 organisations et collectifs depuis le mois de septembre une campagne qui s'est appelée Campagne antiracisme et solidarité, avec la volonté d'essayer d'apporter une autre voix que celle qui dominait dans les médias.
So in France, alongside 400 other organizations, we have launched an anti-racist campaign called the Anti-Racism and Solidarity Campaign. Back in December or September, was it when we launched it? In order to make another voice, to have another voice heard during all these months.
Dans l'entre-deux tours des présidentielles, quand on connaissait le résultat, on a appelé à une manifestation avec d'autres organisations le 16 avril pour protester contre le résultat des élections et pour dire pas une voix pour Marine Le Pen.
And between the two rounds, when Marine Le Pen was qualified to the second round, we organized a demonstration alongside, again, other organizations on 16th of April to protest against the election results and to say not one single vote for Marine Le Pen in the second round.
Après les élections présidentielles, nous avons de nouveau organisé une manifestation pour dire qu'il ne fallait pas attendre le résultat des législatives pour s'organiser face aux dangers fascistes.
And after the second round of the elections, we organized another demonstration where the main message was we're not waiting for the results of the parliamentary elections to start organizing against racism and fascism.
Et à l'ouverture de la première session au Parlement, nous avons organisé un rassemblement devant l'Assemblée nationale de solidarité avec les migrants pour rappeler en fait les revendications des sans-papiers.
And on the opening day of the new National Assembly, of the new Parliament, we organized a demonstration outside Parliament alongside undocumented migrants organizations again, in solidarity with migrants and against the far right.
Alors, je parlais au tout début des extrêmes possibilités. Évidemment, il y a des possibilités en France de construire cette riposte, notamment grâce à l'espoir suscité par les millions de personnes qui ont voté pour Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
And when I was talking about extreme possibilities, the possibility does exist in France to build an alternative and to build a resistance. One signal of that, one symbol of that, is actually the millions of people who voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon left-wing candidacy.
Il a mené une campagne en rappelant que la police tue dans les quartiers, tue des jeunes arabes et noirs. Il a mené aussi une campagne antiraciste contre l'islamophobie.
In his campaign, he reminded, and he was very clear about that the French police killed young blacks and Arabs in working class neighborhoods, and he also had an anti-racist message against Islamophobia in particular.
Maintenant, il y a un débat qui s'ouvre dans la gauche sur justement la façon dont on va pouvoir gagner face à la logique du racisme et aux dangers fascistes. C'est est-ce qu'on va y arriver à travers les institutions et le Parlement, ou est-ce qu'on va y arriver grâce aux mobilisations par en bas, dans les quartiers, dans les lieux de travail et sur les universités.
So there is a very, very important debate opening up on the left in France right now, is that how are we going to fight against racism and fascism? Is it going to be through parliament, or is it going to be through mobilizations from below, on the street, in neighborhoods, in workplaces?
Et pour le dire un peu directement, il y a eu deux gros problèmes dans la campagne de Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Le premier, c'est qu'il a à plusieurs occasions demandé un débat avec l'extrême droite, notamment Zemmour.
And to go straight to the point, I think there were two problems with Jean-Luc Mélenchon's campaign. On the one hand, he asked repeatedly and publicly to have a debate with the far-right candidate Éric Zemmour.
Et parallèlement à ça, il n'y a jamais eu aucune proposition de mobilisation contre le résultat du Rassemblement national, que ce soit durant la campagne des présidentielles ou après. Et la seule proposition qui a émergé de Jean-Luc Mélenchon, c'était de voter pour lui pour qu'il devienne Premier ministre.
And on the other problem is that at no point during the presidential campaign, after presidential campaign, or during the parliament campaign, was there a call by Jean-Luc Mélenchon for mass mobilizations against the far right? The only real call was basically to vote for him and for his candidates so that he could become prime minister.
Et je voudrais terminer un petit peu sur cet aspect-là en disant que la stratégie de Jean-Luc Mélenchon, elle est au minimum extrêmement risquée dans une situation d'instabilité politique incroyable en France, jamais vue depuis les années 30.
And to sum up, I think that Jean-Luc Mélenchon's strategy is actually extremely risky in the context of an extreme political instability in France, such as we have not seen since the 1930s.
Revenons sur les résultats des élections. Macron n'a jamais est le président sans doute le plus illégitime de la Ve République.
And to come back to the results of the elections, Macron is without a doubt the most electorally illegitimate president of the Fifth Republic in France. That is since the 1950s.
Moins de 2 personnes sur 5 inscrits sur les listes électorales ont voté pour Macron contre Marine Le Pen.
Less than 2 persons over 5. Less than 40% of people who were actually registered on the electoral list, that is a lot less than the general population, actually voted for Macron against Marine Le Pen in the second round.
Les deux partis traditionnels en France qui alternaient pour la gestion des institutions, le Parti Socialiste d'un côté, les Républicains de l'autre, ont fait moins de 2% pour le Parti Socialiste et moins de 5% pour les Républicains.
So the two big classical parties of the ruling class in France who have been alternating for decades in government, so the Socialist Party and the Les Républicains, the classical right-wing party, had less than 2% of the votes for the Socialist Party and less than 5% of the votes for the Republican Party.
Et quand on regarde qui a voté pour Macron, ce sont les classes moyennes supérieures.
And when we look at who voted for Macron, it is the upper middle class.
Ce qui veut dire que notre classe, les classes populaires, se sont soit abstenues, soit malheureusement ont voté pour Marine Le Pen.
Which means that our class, the working classes and the poor, either abstained, so did not vote, or unfortunately voted for Marine Le Pen. We're talking about the second round.
Pour regagner dans notre classe une solidarité antiraciste et une mobilisation antifasciste, ça ne va pas passer que par des discours. Il va falloir proposer des initiatives, proposer de s'organiser, proposer des actions.
And to regain an anti-racist and anti-fascist hegemony in our class, speeches and discourses are not enough. We're going to have really concrete propositions of organization and of mobilization.
Le champ institutionnel n'est pas le terrain sur lequel on pourra reconstruire la gauche.
The institutional field is not the field on which we will be able to rebuild the left.
C'est laisser la main à Macron que de penser ça.
To think that is to leave the initiative to Emmanuel Macron.
Et quand on regarde ce qu'a été la position de Macron par rapport au Rassemblement national et à Jean-Luc Mélenchon, officiellement, il a porté un discours de ne pas vouloir choisir. Dans la réalité, à chaque fois, il fait le choix de barrer la route à la gauche.
And if we look at Macron's position during the parliamentary elections, because it's in 2 rounds again, whenever there was a confrontation between Rassemblement National and Jean-Luc Mélenchon in the second round, Macron's official position was neither nor, neither the fascist nor Jean-Luc Mélenchon, but in reality, he did everything to attack Jean-Luc Mélenchon during this period. He was attacking the left.
Et la position de consensus au Parlement, ça va être toutes les initiatives et les lois racistes, nationalistes, islamophobes. D'ailleurs, Marine Le Pen a d'ores et déjà dit que son premier projet de loi serait une loi pour interdire le foulard dans l'espace public, dans tous les espaces publics, interdire le foulard.
So what's going to dominate this parliament, because Macron does not have a majority alone, but he has a majority with the fascists, and so what's going to dominate is the racist, reactionary, and Islamophobic bills. And Marine Le Pen has already said that her first bill that she will propose to Parliament will be a bill to ban the hijab from all public places.
Ce n'est donc pas plus d'État qu'il nous faut, mais plus d'organisation de notre classe.
So what we need is not more state, but more organization.
Il y aura des explosions dans les semaines et dans les mois qui viennent, pour toutes les raisons que j'ai indiquées.
There will be explosions of resistance in the coming weeks and months.
La question, c'est qui aura préparé le terrain de ces explosions? Est-ce que c'est la gauche ou est-ce que c'est le Rassemblement national?
And the question is, who will prevail, but because who will have prepared the terrain for these explosions? Will it be the left or will it be the fascists?
Et donc, pour conclure, je voudrais repartir de ce que disait Trotsky sur le fascisme. L'idée que le fascisme, c'était une agglomération de poussière humaine, au sens où ça mettait ensemble des gens qui n'avaient pas les mêmes intérêts au service d'un projet réactionnaire.
And to go back to Trotsky's definition of fascism, he said that it was a gathering, an agglomeration of human dust, of people coming together who did not actually fundamentally share the same interests.
Et que nous avons le potentiel de riposter, de par notre nombre, mais aussi du fait de notre organisation collective en tant que classe.
And we have the potential to respond and to crush them, first of all because of our numbers, and second of all because of our organization, our different class organizations.
Et c'est donc ça qu'il s'agit de construire maintenant, à la fois pour faire reculer le danger fasciste et pour aussi mettre fin au système qui permet que ce type de projet émerge.
And this is what we have to do. We have to organize first in order to resist the fascist danger, and second in order to put an end to the system which makes it come again and again.
Thank you.
I'm going to take the comrade here and then the comrade here. Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah.
I've got one, don't worry. I'm one of them.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, you hold it.
Hello? Yeah. Right. Thanks, by the way. That was a fantastic talk. Because I wouldn't say I know much about like French politics or the system. Something I wanted to highlight was you talked about the hijab ban, and I wanted to just highlight that it was mentioned in a previous meeting that Le Pen sort of uses women's liberation as a guise for, as a sort of disguise for spreading more Islamophobia, and it's just about hate really, and how that as a woman she's sort of defending a system that would oppress her, just being like a sort of a member of the ruling class against the working class. So it's quite interesting to hear that. But a question I also had was about the mainstream media in France, because I don't know much about it. Like in this country, a lot of them are like, I would say, backed by like the Tories or towards the right, centre maybe to the right. And I wanted to know, in France, is it the same? Most of the, the most popular mainstream news organisations, are they politically positioned towards the right? And that was the question I had. And then the last point I wanted to make was, I think it's great that you're organising against this. You're like pretty much fighting a war against fascism, and you're on the front lines. So I admire that. That's it.
The comrade with the red hat on just there. I'm going to give you 3 minutes, by the way, and I'll tap it when we've got 1 minute left. Okay.
Thank you very much. Hello? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. Ma'am, I'm trying to articulate the idea of what Macron recently admitted, President of France, that in the 1994, one in the genocide, out of over 1 million people died. And yet they're still dying today in Congo across the Tutsis I'm talking about, which are bad. I demand and request all French organizations, if they happen to be an organization of working class, demand from France, government or state, to reparations, repair, that is mainly called, not money necessarily, but repair, psychological repair mean, so that perhaps France or French people can be admissible and admitted back in Africa, or target Yanis or Tutsis, in order to reconcile ourselves. Otherwise, and I see French, I'm not racist, I don't understand it, because I've not been able to look at the person as immediate thing that is racist. But I have seen racists in France who tell you, libere, when they look at you, when you don't know even what's exactly in place. But that's Europeanism I'm talking about. So we should be able to go international, not only in France, but international by working class, as has been done historically by no other professor who was at Sorbonne University, who was student union at the time, when in 1965, that was able to overthrow the most serious De Gaulle, President of France. He was the one who, Prontas, he was called, Professor Prontas, and Sorbonne, on which I went to see him to find that he committed suicide. I almost cried. And in fact, I cried. Literally, I cried. In 2006, that was March 2003. I cried literally. To see that he could not do anything but had nothing but committed suicide. That was Prontas, who overthrew by organizing workers and students. I was president of Students' Union, and by working like that, that's the only way you can succeed to make sure that this fascist government and fascist open must be organization as this young man, and was young man, but killed himself. Please, please, please do the same as he did, because it was historical fact. Thank you very much.
Do you want to take this one?
Yeah.
It's a bit quiet, isn't it? If you take the one just there.
Thank you very much, Vanina, for that. I just wanted to ask you to talk a little more about the real depth of Islamophobia in French society, which really, you know, is quite shocking when you see how mainstream and how deep it is. And I think some of the success of Marine Le Pen has not just been about detoxifying her party, her organisation, but the ideas that it is being driven have become so mainstream within French society and drag the whole political agenda to the right, and everybody chases her ideas to outdo her in racism and Islamophobia. And I wondered, there's a unique, in French politics, the laïcité, the sort of translated as secularism, but that idea that means that, you know, religion is something, that basically it means that some feminists and some on the left have actually not defended women wearing the hijab, have not defended women who go to swimming pools on the beach in bikinis, with the idea that this is not, you know, liberating for women, though how anybody could say that it was liberating for women for the state to tell them what to wear. You know, I think this is something obviously that we as socialists reject, but I think she has been successful in weaponizing the language of women's rights and saying Muslims and migrants are a threat to women's liberation. And I wondered if maybe tell us a little more about that, because it's something very different. And one final question is about class. Is absolutely, I agree with Vanina, racism is absolutely at the heart of their politics. But Marine Le Pen talked a lot about class bitterness, about poverty, about the pensions, about the impact of crisis on working people not having jobs and the industries closing down. And I wondered to how much did that have an effect, and how much can we see some sort of working class alternative?
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you for the information, it's quite informative. I was interested in the aspect around the elections. I was in France in around 2002, and it was quite worrying that I saw Le Pen all over the walls where I was in the north. So I was just wondering about the aspects of it. I mean, who is it that's voting? And, you know, yes, there's brainwashing and it's worrying that Le Pen is increasing in her voting, the votes. People are voting for her more and more each year. Same with Macron, really. He's also increasing towards the right wing, and it's also rebuilding then the aspect and organising around the left-wing parties as well. I don't know how that's going on in France to prepare themselves to, you know, overcome this fear of Islamophobia. And from that aspect around the recent elections, I was thinking about, you know, who is it, do we know, who is it that's voting for Le Pen or the right wing? Is it the North? Is it the South? Is it everybody? Is it the young? Is it the old? But then it's about education. I think we need to educate people around, you know, common humanity rather than fear of Islam or any other culture or religion. But that's my
Is the man just here?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a really informative talk that the comrade was putting in and stuff like that. But I wanted to say something really, which is that it's not something that's a French problem. They've got Le Pen, they've got obviously the vote for the presidential election, 8 or 9 MPs in Parliament. This could never happen here. I mean, it's a really important thing for us to start going through, because the kind of state racism and Islamophobia that we see coming from Macron and previous politicians is exactly mirrored in Britain. There are under-flights, you know, the comments about Muslim women being looking like letterboxes and all the rest of it open up the same space. And why, obviously, I mean, obviously we've been working with comrades over international initiatives around the demonstrations and stuff in March to mark UN Anti-Racism Day. Why it's crucial what we do here as well is about the argument about how you combat this. Because we know in British history, we've seen the rise of fascism on several major occasions. Back in the 1930s with Mosley, in the 70s with the National Front, the British National Party, even 3 or 4 years ago in this country, people remember 4 years ago and stuff, there were major mobilisations in support of Tommy Robinson, a fascist who, up to 15,000 on the streets and stuff, trying to support him after he was jailed and stuff around it. So the model that the comrade is talking about about attempting not to concentrate on simple opposition in Parliament, right stuff, but mobilisations on the street and mobilisations that cross, you know, that try to draw in the trade union movement and try to draw in sections of the left to work together are absolutely crucial. Just the last thing to say about that, right, like you said, is the question of class. Next Sunday, Tommy Robinson will be going to Telford. He's going to Telford to do what he described as an intimate book launch. You can buy a ticket for £58 to see Tommy, right? Why is he going to places like Telford? Because one is he's trying to pick up on the issue of grooming cases and try to argue that these things only happen amongst the Muslim population in Britain. The second thing, he's going to working class areas that feel abandoned and feel that the Labour Party has let them down. And at the minute, our far right may be down and seen down and out, right stuff over it, but there is nothing, right stuff in the present circumstances of political polarisation that means that Britain is in some way this island where these extremes don't happen and stuff around it. And I think that's a real crucial point, but also, if we can show in this country what a united front looks like, then we give support to the comrades who are trying to establish the same tradition inside France. So it's good for us, but it's good for them too.
Yes.
Hello, swag.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi everybody, this is the first time I speak at Marxism. Sorry if it's not very clear. Thank you for the interpretation, I thought it was brilliant, well done. I would like to say that to this gentleman here who asked who voted for Le Pen, it was mainly like people in the countryside, because in the big towns they voted Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and around sort of in suburbs with the cité, with the high-rise buildings and all that, poor people also voted Jean-Luc Mélenchon. So it was mainly the countryside and the little villages, and yeah. I just wanted to say that what Jean-Luc Mélenchon, his strategy was, I thought was genius, because he managed to make an alliance with other left-wing parties and also the Greens. And I thought that Jeremy Corbyn, if he had also left the Labour Party when, I mean, he could still do it actually, and maybe he could like create, like bring all the momentum people with him and create something. You also asked whether the change could come from the top, from the institutions or from the grassroots. I think it has to be both. And I think that Jean-Luc Mélenchon has created amazing dynamic to change things from the inside, because his plan is actually to change the constitution and put workers' rights, but make things better for the poor people, into the constitution, and that would be an amazing thing that we wouldn't be able to come back on too easily. So that, but also you need the mobilisation from the base, of course, because that's, you know, that's how we know that things change as well. And also I wanted to say that the media had a massive influence on the Le Pen vote. It was basically whenever we heard anything about what Macron was doing, there was the opposite would be presented as Le Pen. So obviously people who weren't happy with Macron, they would turn to Le Pen, because that's what was being said on the media everywhere. So I don't think that, so yeah, I'm not blaming people who voted for Le Pen, because they just want no more neoliberalism, so they're just kind of voting for the others. But I do think that we need to do éducation populaire and bring them to our side, because we have the real solutions for them. Voilà.
Thanks a lot. I'm David Farrow from Barcelona. Two things briefly. Firstly, the comrade who was here explaining some of the terrible things that mainstream governments and parties have done. In the Spanish state, just a week ago, they slaughtered 37 people on the frontier at Melilla. That is terrible, but it's a mistake to think that's the same as fascism, as some people are saying. Fascism will be a million times worse, as you can see from the 1930s, so we do need that distinct struggle against fascism. Secondly, Vanina finished with something important, saying that we need to fight against the fascists and we need to fight against the system for an alternative. Totally true, but those are two distinct struggles with distinct forces. The classical thing on the radical left is to say you need that, and therefore the only people that can fight fascism are the radical left with our programme. That has led to defeat after defeat. The model of anti-fascist action was launched in Germany in summer 1932, and 6 months later Hitler was in power. In Catalonia we started Unite Against Fascism and Racism in 2010. It took time. At that time, the strongest fascist presence in institutions was in Catalonia. They almost got into Catalan parliament. They were the second force in some cities. With 5 years' work, we defeated them completely, and that party was destroyed. It was a bonsai version of Le Pen. It was destroyed. In Madrid, the dominant idea on the radical left is to fight fascism, you have to present your alternative program, you limit yourself to social struggles, which they don't do anyway, and you don't talk about the fascists. The fascists, the far right, are much stronger in Madrid than they are in Barcelona. Vox can't announce events in Catalonia because they know there'll be a protest against them by all sorts of people that don't share an anti-capitalist program. So this is the point about the United Front, is all sorts of people who are against fascism and also against Islamophobia, which is a difficult struggle to win those arguments. I mean, if only it was only parts of the left who are against Islamophobia. I think in a lot of Europe, most of the French is in favour of Islamophobia. So the point I want to make, fascism is a distinct problem. We do need to fight capitalism. To stop the fascists, we need an awful lot more people, including anti-capitalists. And if we do that well, we will strengthen the anti-capitalist left. But if we limit the struggle against fascism to only anti-capitalists, we'll just need a handful of people and we'll be defeated.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you for your talk and translation as well. I just had a couple of questions. The first one being that, do you think that the strategy to get into the system and become more respectable can play against them in the long run, because they've presented themselves as an anti-system party, such as the N5S did in Italy, and it's just imploded last week. So do you think it could play for us in the long run? Or do you think actually it could just bring the right wing of the right wing, so people to just unity with them and just create more, just bring more voters to them? Secondly, how can we bring a good alternative to them on the ideological plan? Because I think obviously people vote for the RN because they're racists, but right now their first preoccupation would be more like how they're going to end the month. So how can we bring those solutions to working people? And thirdly, in the election results, you talked about working people not voting, but most prominently young people did not vote. In the MP election, 70% of people under 35 did not vote. And these people share Mélenchon's views of on ecology, on working rights, everything. So how do we bring these people back? Thank you.
Thank you, Vanina, for the talk, and to Jan for the translation too. I want to take on an argument that's very common on the French left, which is that Le Pen and Rassemblement is simply an extension of Macron and the other political forces in the mainstream. Of course, it is true that the Islamophobia, the authoritarianism, the racism of Macron and even other forces like the Parti Socialist, the Labour-type party as well, have enabled the fascists to grow. There's no doubt at all about that. They create a situation in which the fascists can grow. But it is not true that the victory of Le Pen would be like Macron, but just a little bit worse. The victory of Le Pen would be a smashing of not just the far left, but also even the most right-wing forms of trade union leaders. It would mean rounding up and imprisoning all of those who were opponents in any way of a fascist regime. Of course, Le Pen couldn't do that straight away, but it would immediately, for example, embolden the worst elements in the security forces. You know, the cops vote very heavily for the fascists anyway, it's not a surprise, but they vote very, very heavily for either Eric Zemmour or Marine Le Pen. But they would be unleashed as well by a Le Pen victory. One of the central elements in their campaign was to say that the cops should be less accountable, for example, to any sort of control. It would also encourage the street fighting groups, which are small in France, but are real as well. You get a glimpse of the sorts of groups that attack LGBT people, that attack the left, that attack anti-racists and so on. And because the reality of fascist victory is a break from what exists at the moment, of course you have to attack state racism, you have to attack the Islamophobia of the government and the cops and so on. But also there is a basis for a united front which is broader than simply the far left, which is broader than simply the anti-capitalists, in order to attack the fascists. This is what comrades are involved in. I should say, it's easiest to create such a united front when the fascists are small. It's harder now, because they saturate the airwaves. The amount of publicity, for example, that Eric Zemmour was essentially a media creation on one level, incredible level of media publicity, and you know, it's utterly normalised that Le Pen appears on everything. But we have to recognise that while the fight against state racism is necessary, there's also a need for a specific struggle against the fascists, because otherwise they are going to continue to grow in the way that they have.
The woman just here at the front.
Sorry for my accent because I'm so French. I want to come back about who votes for Marine Le Pen and why she talked a lot about the level of, I don't know how to say it,
money at the end of the month, I guess.
Yes, about the money and the inflation and so on. So I think she doesn't need to say anymore she's racist. So when you look about what she proposed about for the working class, it's national preference is always the answer. So for the end of the month, she proposed a racist way. So not a real answer for the working class. So I think during this campaign, she doesn't need to say anymore that she is racist. Everybody knows that. So when you vote for Rassemblement National, you vote for racist and you know it. So I think we must understand that we first need to talk with people who are against and doesn't vote for Rassemblement National, and not to concentrate first about the working class who vote for a racist party. Because if we do that, I think we doesn't make a clear argument about who are we and who are them. I don't know if you understand what I mean. That we must first create a front against the fascists, and when we are strong enough, the people who hesitate from our place have something to choose, clearly should choose. So, and in this state of this mind, I think the Mélenchon campaign and so on wasn't the solution, because it was really, I don't know how to say, comment tu dis délégataire? But I don't know, but people don't act really to change the things, they just vote. And there are a lot of, the main argument was to vote for Mélenchon, it was the solution. And I think it wasn't, and between the first and second one, we'll see that, because there are, for example, La France Insoumise doesn't call to the demonstration against the National Front in France. So it wasn't the solution, because it doesn't propose to our class to organize, and to organize fast, because it's an emergency. So I think it was the main problem to this left campaign. So.
Mine's just a really quick point about what my comment at the front was mentioning about fascism in Britain. The fact that also is in America, and it's in so many different countries, and there's such a rise of these people benefiting off the struggles of the working class, and we have to be there to tell these people that they don't care about them. I know that they go and they vote and they think, oh, the Tories, they're going to do it for me because look, they've promised me this and they've promised me that. But as they've shown, they made these promises, they never keep them. And we have to be there to say, we actually care about you, we actually care about your struggles, and we have to encourage our sisters and brothers in other countries to do the same, because at the end of the day, it's a whole world-class thing. And those small groups, they just appear. They profit off of this idea of the people struggling. They then encourage racist ideas in these people. They encourage homophobic ideas in these people, which divides us more as people. So we should be talking to our friends in other countries about helping them, and then also organising here, organising in America, organising in Germany, literally everywhere. Bring it up anywhere I can think of. Australia. You know, but it's just the idea. It's really annoying to see them constantly seeing the struggles of other people and just thinking, oh yeah, I can benefit off of that, when we actually care about these people, and we actually care about what people go through, and we want to unite people, and they don't want to do that. They just want it for themselves. That's all I have to say.
Be the last speaker, actually.
Okay, thanks. Thank you to the Comrades for such an important meeting. And I agree with the speakers that have said this is a question of international importance, because I think that what we're seeing is the same pattern. You know, the last speaker referred to, of course, the collapse of the centre of mainstream politics amidst the crisis. And so you have a situation after the election result where, you know, the centre-right of politics is celebrating the victory of Macron as something that's a vindication of that politics, and it's very, very much the opposite, I think. I mean, you look at the relationship of the state racism that was talked about, pushed by Macron and fanning the flames of far-right and fascist ideas. This is something that we have to be conscious of, whatever the situation in the different countries that we're organising in. So the impact of Trumpism internationally is something where there's essentially been a massive megaphone given to, you know, veiling sort of racist populism to the far right, to and to fascists everywhere. I think that the far right is taking confidence from that. So you have this kind of vile milieu of forces across the international picture, and you know they're using different tactics in different places. The fascists, if you look at the example of obviously Golden Dawn, where they have gone and but for the kind of classical fascist method of organising the street armies, and that's something that has been defeated by you know the Greek comrades and the Greek movement, where they have organised to expose these people as you know as fascists and built a mass movement, so that when that court, you know, they had the victory in the court case. There were something like 50,000 people on the streets outside, including the organised working class at the centre of it. And I think, you know, of course, Le Pen and the National Rally are using a different tactic of trying to sanitise and detoxify the image. But you know, you look at the overall campaign and the dynamic between Le Pen and the National Rally and Eric Zemmour in the election. It's by far a victory for the centre of mainstream politics, because the overall far-right vote is increased, and you know, could see that Le Pen and the National Rally have actually consolidated, and we'll see that as a big victory. All the radicalisation that we're seeing, I think, is the question of what the left does. There is radicalisation going on to the left, there is radicalisation going on to the right, precisely because the centre politics has failed and the system has failed. And I think we have lots of examples, you know, in Greece, Austria as well, which we don't talk about, and here in Britain, which Michael and others have mentioned. We face the threat of state racism actually is a bigger threat for us at the moment, because we pushed back Tommy Robinson because he was nowhere near in the position of strength that the National Rally was in. But I know that there were big demonstrations in between, you know, the presidential election and the election where they got 89 seats, and I wondered what the comrades think the sort of capacity and space is inside you know, the working class movement to try and mobilise that in terms of people on the streets, on the basis that people have talked about, to come out and really expose. When we it was a bit different situation, of course, but you know, one of the things that fascist Tommy Robinson in Britain said when he failed to get his seat in the European elections was that everywhere he went, there were people who were Muslim, Jewish, black, white, trade unionists who came out and said, "You're a Nazi, you're a Nazi, you're a Nazi," and he just couldn't get beyond it. And I think that's what we, you know, it's a different situation, but I'd be interested to hear what the space for that is in France.
Thanks for everybody who's made a contribution. I'm really sorry, there's loads of other people who had their hands up and I didn't get them in. But I think it's been a fantastic discussion anyway. And thank you to Vanny and Jack. And I think Jack is going to do the summing up, so unusual.
Right, yeah, sorry about that. It's because we don't have much time, and with translation and all of that, and we arrived a bit late. So, yeah, I'm going to start by pitching our journal. It's in French. It's good, so buy it. It took a lot of work, so if you speak French and read French and are interested, buy it. And if you don't speak French, buy it. If still buy it. Yeah, we need money. That has to pay for itself. Okay, so yeah, on the question that you've raised on reparations for the Rwandan genocide and really all the endless list of crimes of the French state against African people and other people, but yeah, African people are a big bunch of that. I think this is it's actually an extremely important issue, because what the fascists do is, one of the things that they do is to try to create a unity between people who should not be united. It's try to get the French white working class to identify with the French state and therefore with the crimes of the French state. The whole thing about saying the colonization of Algeria was a good thing. Thing about saying that Pétain, who actually deported 15,000 French Jews amongst many crimes that he committed, to Germany to get them killed in gas chambers, to say that he actually protected the Jews. All of this is actually very important to create a unity, to get people below to follow the French state and to get on with nationalism. And the question of reparations, therefore, it's extremely important for African people, of course. It's a moral issue, but even for us in France, it's very important to have that and to actually put forward the political argument that there is more in common between African migrants who are drowning in the Mediterranean and white working class French people than there is between white working class French people and Marine Le Pen or the French state and the people who represent them. So this is really, thank you for raising this issue. And on the question of who voted for Le Pen, why they voted for Le Pen, and things like that. To me, it's not first and foremost a moralistic issue. You voted for Le Pen, therefore you're a racist. It's a political issue. It's an issue of how do we mobilize and how do we understand this motivation as well. Because you see, one interesting thing that happened during the National Assembly campaign, electoral campaign, is that you had many Le Pen candidates who went on the media and who were asked about public services, about the cost of living, and about things, that they say that they're concerned with. And they had no answer, actually. They were like, is hospital underfunded? We haven't heard, etc., etc. And they tried to bring everything back to Muslims, to migrants, to so-called insecurity, to so-called, working class suburbs, thugs, and things like that. And therefore, we really need to understand, maybe the people who vote for Marine Le Pen are angry because of the cost of living, because of no public services and all that. But fundamentally, they have accepted the argument that this has happened because of Muslims, because of migrants, because of non-French people. And therefore, they have accepted that the solution to these problems is actually not to allow non-French people, this is national preference that Sana was talking about, to get access to those services so that the real French can get access to those services. So it is fundamentally, actually, accepting a racist argument. And another thing is, before we used to say, there is no alternative. The only opposition to Macron and to neoliberalism is Le Pen. Well, there was an electoral alternative this time round. It didn't prevent Le Pen from getting more votes than last time. Mélenchon had actually a very strong presidential campaign, and he had an even stronger parliamentary campaign. This did not reduce the number of votes for Marine Le Pen. So this is a distinct issue. Maybe they're angry because of neoliberalism, but they are very much directing their anger against migrants, against black people, against Muslims, and so on, because they have accepted the racist argument fundamentally. So it's very important to make a difference, to mark a difference between the people who, and I think there's still the majority of people in France who think that the most hated French politician is Marine Le Pen. She is still the most hated French politician. And this is where we have to tap. This is where we have to get support. This is the people that we need to organize. And the way to do that, I mean, there's no magical formula, but many comrades mentioned the idea that, of course, fascism is a result of capitalism, but we cannot, in order to build an anti-fascist and an effective anti-fascist struggle, we cannot pose being a good anti-capitalist and agreeing on everything as a prerequisite. To us, the only prerequisite, and this is what we've tried to do, you know, we're a very small organization, but wherever we are and we have a presence, this is what we've tried to build, and we actually had some measure of success in this. So to us, it's an indicator of the possibilities. Is to say very simply, it's what we did, for instance, in the district where I am in Paris, during the presidential campaign, very, very simply, that we considered that Éric Zemmour and Marine Le Pen should not have the right to campaign for a democratic election. And therefore, we're not letting them put posters up, we're not letting them give leaflets out at markets and in stalls and everything. This was the very simple basis of the campaign, and we actually managed to gather quite a lot of people around this principle. And since it's a working class and mainly immigrant neighborhood that they're trying to organize in, we found out, you know, with experience, that what we needed is actually to give ordinary people a bit more confidence that it's okay to kick them out. And you know, we started it, and then people started joining in, and then systematically we had dozens of people on a you know, a simple signal list to tell us that, oh, they're having a stall at this market, let's go and kick them out. And we had a lot of success in this. So it's a very small... It's really a very small example, but it shows that there is actually still, in spite of the mainstream media, in spite of the brainwashing, in spite of the 89 MPs of the National Front, there is still a majority of people in France who do consider that they are a danger and that they are extremely toxic and that they should not be given a democratic place. And what we need to do next, and this is very difficult, but it's also, I mean, there's no choice, you know, if we don't fight, we're going to lose. So we need to fight. What we need to do next is to make sure that those 89 MPs do not translate in a local mass organization for the fascists, because that would be catastrophic. The stakes are extremely high. We were talking about the 1930s in slow motion. Well, it's speeding up. So this is what we need to do around the very simple principle that there is no democratic space that should be given to those people. And I'll stop it here.